Okay, my name is C.I. Heyden, and you've always heard me talk about the importance of having a sharp knife. The same goes for axes, so I thought tonight we'll go through a quick lesson on how to sharpen an axe, and then we'll show you how to sharpen a knife. So, we'll start with an axe. You're going to want to inspect your axe before you start. It should have been inspected before it was put away, but you can't trust anybody. So, we're going to look here, and we're going to start with the handle. We're going to check the grains on the end of the handle and make sure that they're running parallel with the handle. If they're cross-grained, that's a lot weaker grain. So that's something to look for when you're buying a new axe, making sure that the handle is good. Then we're gonna go through and we're gonna inspect the whole handle. We're gonna look for cracks, splits, nicks, anything that might indicate a weakness in the handle, because if the handle's no good, we aren't going to be using the axe. Next, we're going to go through, we're going to take the head and make sure it's tight. If it's not, we shouldn't be using it. But as you can see in this axe, there's one wooden wedge installed there. You can see that line through there. And that's a wooden wedge that's been hammered in. A new axe handle will come, well, imagine this without the axe head, but then there's a cut right down the middle. And you pound in a wooden wedge, and that swells the handle and to fit the head so the head doesn't fly off. If it's a little loose, what you can do if you have the proper tools, most of these kits, when you get the wooden wedge, they also sell steel wedges. And you're going to drive a steel wedge in this way, perpendicular to the wooden wedge, and that will swell the handle. You're going to inspect the eye of the axe. That's going to be the most obvious place for any cracks. You're also going to inspect the head for any cracks or burrs. As you can see, this one looks pretty good. I do inspect these before I put them away every time before I use them. One other thing, your guys' axe is going to look a little different than mine, because I actually stripped all the factory varnish off, and then I put linseed oil on mine. It creates a better grip, and it also cuts down any blistering you might do if you're not wearing gloves while you're using this. Now this is more of a chopping axe than a splitting axe. It's more of a falling axe. It'd be used for cutting down trees, but it can be used for splitting wood. It's just not as effective as a splitting axe, which the throat is going to be much wider on it, the bevels here. Okay, so before we get started, we're going to make sure we have a few things. We're going to make sure we have a Sharpie marker. This is a sharpening stone, a whetstone. This is a 2-grit stone. As you can see, there's 2 different colors here. So the darker gray is the more coarse side. The lighter gray is the finer side. I can't tell you the grit, I don't quite remember. But we're going to use the more coarse first, and then we'll work our way up to using the fine grit. And that's just to remove the final burrs from the blade. Okay, we've taken our axe, we've inspected it, it all looks good. We're going to look down and make sure the handle's straight. If it's got a wonky bend in it, that could be a sign that maybe it's been abused in the past, and it might not actually be safe to use. You're going to want to check that really close for cracks. Okay, so technically the way I'm supposed to teach you guys is with a whetstone. But let me tell you something. Most of the axes you're going to get aren't going to be in that great of shape. So what I like to do is I like to start off with a mill file. It's called a bastard file. It has it's the same on both sides. It doesn't change. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna take our Sharpie marker and we're gonna color along the edge of the blade. Until you get used to it, this is what you're gonna wanna do. Until you get proficient at this skill, you're gonna wanna do this on both sides. And I'll show you why in just a second. So I like to use the file to get rid of any big gouges or nicks in the blade. It removes a lot more steel than a whetstone, and it's going to be a lot more efficient and effective. Okay, so as you can see, we've colored both sides of the edge. It doesn't matter what color marker you use. What we're going to try to do, we're going to use our sharpening tools to get rid of that now. So we're going to start off. What you do on one side, you must do on the other. That's a rule of thumb for sharpening that you're going to have to stick with. So I'm going to start off with my file. Now, file is the same as any other metal cutting tool, whether it's a file or a hacksaw. You are only going to put pressure on the forward stroke. Always on the forward stroke, and then lift it off. If you drag it back, it won't actually cut, and all it will do is actually dull your tool, your file, or your hacksaw. So, we're gonna hold it at about a 35, 45 degree, between 35 and 45 degrees to the bevel of the axe. And we're just going to start at the bottom here. We're going to hold the axe tight with our hand back here. Normally we'd have a handle on this. I don't keep handles on mine though. And then we're just going to run it along. And you hear that noise? That's the file finding a burr. 2, 3. So where I'm finding that noise, I'm going to work at that a little bit more. Because what that's indicating to me is there's a little bit of a deformity in the blade there. We're counting as we're doing this, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, well, let's go to even 15. 14, 15, 16, oops. Okay. So we're gonna go over, we're gonna do the same on the other side. We're gonna do 16, 15 or 16, holding, so here's how I hold my file to keep everything safe. Finger on the back, that's we put a little bit of downward pressure on it, gripped firmly in my hand, holding it on the edge of the table, holding it at a 35 to 45 degree angle. Okay, so I've done 15 strokes on each side, and if you look closely here, I've taken the marker just off the very edge of this blade. Be careful when you're doing that, there's going to be steel slivers there. Okay, so we've used our file. That's taken off the worst of the nicks and gouges. There weren't actually that many on here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use, I just use basic 3-in-1 oil. You want to get your stone a little bit wet, a little bit of oil, water. Some people spit on them. It just, it helps keep your stone useful longer. It doesn't wear off as much. So I just put 3 or 4 drops on there where I'm going to be working. Now, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Let's do 10 strokes with the coarse side first, and let's see how much of that marker we can get rid of. So same motion, we're pushing ahead, we're making sure it's moving 2 directions all the time, forward and upward at the same time. Okay, we've done 10, and as you can see, I'm putting more friction on the bottom than on the top because I still have marker left up here. So I'm going to do 5 more up here and get rid of that marker. Same thing, 35 to 40 degrees. Okay, so we've gotten rid of most of that marker. That edge is looking good. Coarse side, same thing. It's still wet from the oil. And now we're going to be working top from bottom, unless I want it to go to the other side. I don't move my body, I move my axe. So, 35 to 45 degree angle. There we go, that's 10. But the far side still has marker on it, so we're going to put another 5 on there, starting in the center and only working where the marker is. Okay, so we've gotten rid of most of the marker. Feel the axe, it's fairly sharp. It can always be sharper. Remember what we say about knives and axes? A dull tool will cut you twice as fast. So I like my axes sharp enough that I can actually hold them like this and do carving, make a feather stick or whatever with my axe. There's no reason that tool can't be sharp. So we're going to take our whetstone, and since I have the fine side now, I'm going to take the fine side, three or four drops, just have to make a little wet spot. Then we're going to do the same thing. Okay, we're going to flip it over. We're going to do another 10. Same thing, 35 to 45 degrees. The steeper you hold the angle, the sharper your axe is going to be, but it's actually going to weaken it because of it's going to weaken the bevel. It's going to make the bevel smaller. It's actually going to be harder to cut into wood. So you're going to want to keep about that 40 to 45 mark. Because what that will do, it'll sharpen the edge, but it will also wear your bevels down. Okay, so definitely sharp enough. I can hold it, do some carving. So the last thing we're going to do, we've now confirmed this axe is good and ready to go. Before we put it away, we're going to take some of this basic oil. We're going to put 2 or 3 drops, say 4 on each side. We're going to take a paper towel or a rag. We're just going to oil this head up. And that's going to protect it from rusting. Rust is going to dull your blade. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so about 5 drops. Okay, our axe is sharpened. You should do that every time before you put it away, and as regular maintenance requires it, as you need it. If you're chopping into the ground, you're hitting rocks and stuff like that, make sure to fix that up and change how you're chopping. It's not a delicate tool, but it is still a tool that needs to be taken care of. So after that, put it in its sheath, pack it away for next time.